Hello, this is Matthew Ezekiel, and I will be discussing my country project of Germany, also known as the Federal Republic of Germany, or the FRG, and I have broken up my country project into 7 separate sections, those being history, political institutions, political culture, elections, organizations, economics, and miscellaneous politics. If you wish to jump ahead to any one particular section, you may check the timestamps. Now on to our first section, the history of Germany, in order to provide some context to the nation. Now here it is important to note that the beginnings of the Federal Republic of Germany began in 1949 with its creation. Its creation was allowed by the Western Allied powers, the United States, the United Kingdom, and France. These nations wanted to set up a brand new democratic nation in Germany, and thusly allowed its occupied territories to do so. Now, the constitution that the Federal Republic of Germany would create in 1949 is still used to this day. Basic law. Basic law is set up in the notion that Germany should be a democratic nation with fair and free elections with political liberties provided for its people. Now, some basic facts about Basic Law would include that it set up Germany as a federal system with both a federal government and individual states, both of which having power over particular issues that Basic Law delegates. Another important fact would be that Basic Law set up the Federal Republic of Germany as a parliamentary system. However, Germany would actually have its own twist on the parliamentary system. In addition to having a chancellor, the head of government, it would also have a president, a head of state. Now, the specific roles of parliament and of the chancellor and of the president we shall get into later. But it is important to note that Germany has created a somewhat brand new system, using both a semi-presidential system and a parliament at the same time. Now, here it is important to note that Basic Law was created in order to have a democratic Germany, one free of the failures of the Weimar Republic in the 1920s. Now, to this day, it has been largely successful in doing so, making sure that there have been fair and free elections with political liberties for nearly everybody. And because of this, we must now look at the individual political institutions that actually govern Germany and how the country is actually being run in order to have a better sense of the actual governance of this particular nation. Now on to our second section, the political institutions of Germany. And first, we will look at the executive branch as outlined within Basic Law. Now, within Basic Law, Germany has a semi-presidential system, i.e., they have a president, a head of state, who holds no real power, and a chancellor, the head of government, who holds the real power within the executive branch. Now, first, we will look at the president. Now, the president has several responsibilities that he or she must fulfill. The most prominent being that he or she must nominate or propose a chancellor once the Bundestag, the German parliament, has approved of a chancellor. The president must also sign laws passed by the legislative branch. The president also has the pardon power and has the honor of awarding honors on behalf of the federation. However, the president does have legitimate power under certain conditions, those being that he or she may actually dismiss the chancellor and appoint a new chancellor. Under certain conditions, the president can dissolve the Bundestag, again, the German parliament. And finally, the president may actually appoint or dismiss judges and military officers under certain conditions. However, these all exist under certain conditions that must be met to the letter. And thusly, we must swing over to the real power of the executive branch, the chancellor. Now, the chancellor is elected by the Bundestag. However, the chancellor has significant power and responsibilities, those being that the chancellor may nominate members to the cabinet, the chancellor may determine policy guidelines within Germany, the chancellor may appoint a deputy second in line to the chancellor, the chancellor may also propose to dissolve the parliament to the president, the chancellor also has the power of command over the armed forces of Germany, and finally, the chancellor may actually call for a vote of confidence in order to get parliament in line, of course. Now, as already stated, the Bundestag, the German parliament, is responsible for electing the chancellor, and it is for this reason that we must swing over to the legislative branch. Now, the legislative branch, as outlined under basic law, is bicameral in nature, i.e., they have a federal council, the Bundesrat, and the federal diet, the Bundestag. Now, the federal council is higher than the Bundestag. However, it is the Bundestag and not the Bundesrat that has significantly more power. It is in fact the Bundestag that has the power of choosing the chancellor and may also depose the chancellor. Now, combined, the legislative branch has the responsibility and power to write new laws and legislation. However, all legislation must start in the Bundestag, the federal diet. Now, under basic law, the legislative branch has the power to amend basic law. And finally, the legislative branch has the power over matters pertaining to foreign affairs, defense, customs, international trade, citizenship, post, and telecommunications. It is clear that the legislative branch is independent in the sense that it has the power to write new legislation and is responsible for appointing and removing the chancellor. They have a significant amount of power. And it is because they have so much power that they must be checked by the judicial branch. And finally, rounding out the political institutions of Germany is the judicial branch. Now, the highest court of the land within Germany is the Federal Constitutional Court. Half of its members are elected by the Bundesrat, and the other half are elected by a special committee in the Bundestag. Now, here it's important to note that the Federal Constitutional Court has the power of judicial review and may check the power of both the executive and legislative branch should they ever violate any section of basic law. And it is because of this power that we can clearly see that the judicial branch is independent due to its high levels of power. And with this, we can conclude the political institutions of Germany, and thusly we must look at the people themselves and what they believe in. Moving on to our third section is German political culture. Now here it's important to recognize two things. First, being that the civil society within Germany is open. People are free to associate as they please. And finally, the people enjoy a vast amount of political freedom and are able to express their political ideologies on a frequent basis. Now, the overarching political ideology within Germany is neoliberalism, whereby economic reforms and democratization are highly supported and encouraged throughout the country. Now, there are several parties in Germany, however, there are two major political parties, those being the CDU and the SPD. The CDU is the center-right party, is also the ruling party. The SPD is the center-left party. It is Germany's oldest political party, and it is the primary rival to the CDU. In addition to the CDU and the SPD, there are 5 other parties that have some significance in Germany's federal government, those being the CSU, the AfD, the FDP, the Greens, and the Left. All 5 of these other parties have wide-ranging political ideologies, ranging from a conservative party to a former socialist one. The people have a vast amount of political freedoms, and they use this political freedom to vote for various political parties, ranging from a center-right party to an environmentalist party. Now, there does exist a slight difference between East Germany and West Germany. East Germans are more often than not to support government control and economic regulation than their Western counterparts. Although the overall political climate is certainly unified with tremendous support for democracy and economic liberalization, there still exists a slight difference of opinion between East and West. However, it is important to note that this difference of opinion does not destabilize Germany within any significant amount. Germany is a united nation with both economic and political ties between East and West, and the people would never consider breaking up as they had so long ago. And with this, we can have a clear vision of the political culture within Germany. A people once divided, now unified, with a strong vision, although a slight difference of opinion on economic freedom and political freedom. Now, with this difference of opinion, the people will vote differently. And it is for this reason that we must now look at the elections within Germany itself. Getting into the real meat and potatoes of German politics are German elections. Now, elections in the Federal Republic of Germany are actually quite different than in the United States. For example, every German citizen actually has 2 votes in a Bundestag election. One vote goes directly to a candidate from his or her constituency. On the other hand, another vote goes directly to a political party. In fact, a Bundestag election is actually a combination of first past the post and proportional representation. Not only that, but the Bundestag then goes on to elect one of its own members to the position of chancellor. In fact, the position of president is elected by a federal convention, which is convened by the Bundestag. There are multiple reasons why the FRG uses such complex electoral rules, one of which is to prevent any consolidation of power, like one man was able to do so in the Weimar Republic. On a lighter note, these rules allow for the populace to be thoroughly involved with the politics of their nation, and these elections also serve to bolster state legitimacy, as they are free and fair. Thusly, the elections of Germany are significantly important to the running of the government. With this in mind, we must now look towards organizations outside of the government, so that we can see how individual citizens act while the government is not around, and how they try to act in order to get that government to change and reform. Since its creation in 1949, the Federal Republic of Germany has been well known for supporting the political liberties of its people. And what's important is that the people have used these political freedoms to form individual organizations. Now, although not all organizations have achieved success, many have to great effect. A prime example of this would be when in the 1960s, student organizations were able to get several former Nazi Party members to lose their elections. Now, one of the few drawbacks that Germany has in this regard is that it lacks a formal lobbying register. Now, what this means is that Germany cannot determine pluralist actions within its government. It cannot tell whether or not corporate interests have a significant sway over the government. Thusly, on the whole, we can see that individual organizations do have a significant impact on the government. However, due to the lack of certain government actions and legislation, it is hard to determine whether or not corporate interests have a legitimate claim to influencing the government and its actions. When it comes to economics, Germany is not a nation that lacks in interests. To start off, since its creation in 1949, due to key investments from Western powers such as the United States, the United Kingdom, and France, the FRG has been largely supportive of free market capitalism and has tried to encourage economic liberalization whenever possible. This effect has carried over to its GDP today, which is currently around $4 trillion. Another primary aspect of Germany's economy that causes interest is its membership in the EU. It comes to no surprise that Germany is one of the most influential members in the EU. Now, why is this? Well, first off, Germany is one of the key energy-producing nations in Europe, being one of the largest suppliers of coal in the continent. Additionally, Germany is well known for having a stable, profitable economy. This economy proved essential time and time again when certain nations in the EU suffered from debt. Nations like Greece, for example, which had to be bailed out by Germany in order to have economic stability. And thusly, we can see that through Germany's actions in the EU and its actions during its early childhood in 1949, we can clearly see that Germany is an economically prosperous nation with a rich history in economic interest. Getting into the final aspects of Germany, one must look at the various political actions it has taken since its creation in 1949. To start off, we shall look at its involvement and eventual membership with NATO. Now, since its membership with NATO, the FRG has been largely secure and has avoided interference with other nations, particularly when it comes to the German Democratic Republic. Now, this security has carried over into the modern day, past the Cold War, and Germany remains one of the most important and influential voices within NATO itself. Speaking of important organizations, Germany is also an influential member within the European Union. Due to its vast economic and political resources, Germany is one of the most influential voices within the European Union itself, and it has importantly used this influence and power to make sure that the European Union stays together, supporting countries in need whenever possible. In totality, we can see that Germany remains one of the most influential nations of the world, and importantly, it uses this influence to make sure that conflicts are resolved peacefully with resolution. And through these various political actions, we can see how Germany has changed. Although it might have one of the most darkest periods in human history, we can see that through its various political actions that it has a bright future.